Adam Whitty, welcome back to Build Your Authority.
Joe Bardavia.
That's it? That was it? I thought you were going to go a big long thing. That was it? Oh,
Joe, that's all I got.
Wow, you've run out of gas as we get along on this series, but it's great to see you again, Adam, on Build Your Authority. And as we do on this podcast, every once in a while, we'll bring in an authority in action, someone who's actually done the work that we've been discussing. And today it's David Meerman Scott. He's a renowned marketing strategist. And Adam, you and David go way back. So before we bring him on, let's say some nice things, because then we're going to beat him up during the conversation. But say a couple nice things about David Meerman Scott.
Yeah, well, let me just start with, I always have lived by this maxim that success leaves clues. And the reason these authority in action podcasts are so important is you're going to learn a lot more by hearing David's story and what he did to build his authority than me teaching, right? So that's the first really important thing. Success leaves clues. Pay very close attention to what David's going to share, because a lot of that you can learn from and you can follow that path yourself. The second thing is that David is an incredibly great friend. He is a member of the board of Advantage Media and Forbes Books, so he's that important to me. And candidly, can think of few better people that truly have demonstrated authority in action as well as David. Yeah, he's got all of the accolades with the books: Wall Street Journal bestseller, Publishers Weekly bestseller, Business Week bestseller, has authored, geez, David, I don't want to screw this up, but well over 10 books. Yeah, well over 10 books. So he's what we call a serial author, not a serial killer, a serial author.
And what you're missing, Adam, he's sold over 1 million copies in 30 language of those dozen books. So that's pretty good, I think, right?
Yeah, that's no joke. That's no joke. I mean, we tell everybody, Joe, on this podcast, the worst way to make money as an author is by selling books. We tell people that you shouldn't care about selling books, and David clearly did not get the message. Because over 1 million copies sold is a big, big deal. One of the most in-demand keynote speakers on marketing, especially inbound marketing, which is using content to generate inbound leads. And the more authority you have, the more your phone's going to ring. And so David's going to talk a lot about that. Has an incredibly popular blog that is followed by tens of thousands of people. Keynoter at some of the biggest marketing conferences in the world on an annual basis. I know he's working on another book probably as we speak, because authority in action is you never stop. Man, I mean, the list could go on and on. David Meerman Scott gets what I call the Burger King introduction, Joe.
Yeah.
It's one Whopper after another.
All right, so let's not wait. David Meerman Scott, welcome to Build Your Authority.
Thank you very much. Wow, what an introduction, Burger King. I'm going to have to play this introduction for my family because they don't think I'm a very big deal. But thank you, Adam and Joe. Very kind of you to introduce me in such a wonderful way.
So, David, we should start by talking about authority in terms of the word and how it came to be a part of your life. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. But for a lot of people, when they find this world of building authority and influence, it's all very new to them. So can you take us back to well before all those dozen books were written about the importance of authority in your life?
Sure. I was super lucky because I worked on Wall Street prior to the web. My first job out of college, I worked on a bond trading desk, and I saw authority in the 1980s coming in through the bond trading systems that people were using. And this analyst said something and a stock went up or down, or that reporter said something and a bond went up or down. And then soon after that, I worked for several large financial information companies like Dow Jones and Reuters. And so I had an unfair advantage when the web came around, and I draw my line in the sand of 1995 when Netscape went public. I kind of had a head start, and I could see that I could build my authority And others could build their authority by publishing content on the web. And I was like, wow, this is super cool. I started a blog more than 20 years ago. My first book came out well more than 20 years ago. So I realized quickly, based on my prior experiences, that this is something that I really wanted to do. And what I'm super happy about is that I can't really work at companies because I've gotten fired 3 times. Adam, I don't think you know this about me, but I don't work well in companies as a full-time employee. I'm great when I come in for a couple hours and leave for a couple months and go back again. So Adam, you see the good bits, but if you put me in the office, I will self-destruct and or destruct others. So, but I realized I have to do my own thing. I have to be my own boss. I have to run my own thing. And so I'm coming up now on 23 years, I think, of being an authority and then having that drive the fact that I can remain unemployed for more than 2 decades.
So David, if we looked up the word early adopter in the dictionary, there would be a picture of you. You are the early adopter of early adopters.
Yeah, and Adam, I remember it was 3 years ago, and I'm like pounding on your desk, artificial intelligence, and you're like, what are you talking about? You got to understand it. And remember, I was like, yeah, early on that one. And I'm so glad that you quickly recognized well before ChatGPT that AI has a huge advantage in the business we're in, the book publishing business. And so it was funny because, yes, I'm an early adopter, and I'm also an enthusiastic cheerleader for the things that I love that I adopt early, and I try to get people like you who are very, very early as well to come along on the ride with me.
So here's the question with that context. Most people, when they hear the word authority, they think titles, they think degrees, they think, especially you being from the financial world, the designations after your name on a business card. And of course, we all agree that those are things that do build someone's authority. But you really pioneered supercharging that authority with content. And when you become a creator of content that other people pay attention to, that like shoots you into the stratosphere. One thing we did not mention, Joe, is that David was really on the founding board of advisors for HubSpot, which is now a multi-billion-dollar company and probably the most impactful CRM for small and medium-sized businesses in the world. But let's just talk about early adopter and this whole idea of content as the means to really build authority. Take us from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have any of those designations against my name. I graduated with a humble Bachelor of Arts degree from a small liberal arts college. I didn't do an MBA. I never took an English class, and I've written 12 books. I never took a marketing class, and I'm an authority in marketing. So you can do it. You can decide that you want to be an authority in anything. And as you said correctly, the online content piece is something you can do instantly. You can create your authority online, starting right now, right this instant. And yes, it's become a little bit harder because there's so much noise now out there. But if you grab onto a particular topic that you're an expert in and you have an interesting twist on it and you create content that's going to be valuable for the people that would be interested in that content, that interesting twist, there absolutely are still opportunities for anybody to do this. And that can be a person, it can be a company, as it can be a nonprofit, an educational institution, all sorts of different organizations and or people that can build that authority. And it just requires that you've got to crank out that content. And it could be video content, right? Right now, we're doing audio and video content. We can turn this conversation into LinkedIn posts. We can turn this conversation into tweets. I mean, this one conversation can be repurposed multiple ways that we're doing right now. So we are actually doing right now what we're talking about here, which is build authority by creating content.
We're talking about early adoption, but what if someone's listening or watching this and be like, David, I'm not early on anything. I feel like I'm too late. Like I don't have a TikTok account. What do you say to that person that wants to become authority but feel like they've missed their opportunity?
So a couple things. First of all, you mentioned TikTok. The media that you choose should be something that you either currently enjoy or that you experiment with and that you find that you enjoy. I like to write. I'm a writer. I've been blogging for more than 20 years, as I mentioned earlier. So my natural way of communicating is through writing. Here we are creating both a video and audio podcast. So that could be a way that you could create content. But please don't beat yourself up that you have to be on this network or that network. It's a good idea to be where your buyers are. And if you're trying to reach a B2B audience, that means LinkedIn. If you're trying to reach Gen Z, that might mean TikTok. But make sure that you're not saying, oh my gosh, I have to do this, and like, oh, I have to do everything. No, you don't have to do everything. And regarding a topic, I think that some people create a topic to become an authority around that's too broad. They say, I'm going to create authority around, like, for example, in my case, marketing in general. That's too broad. Think about what is something very specific that you can build authority around. And you can then say, oh, I'm not going to become the authority on marketing. Let's take an example of something that I worked on about, a dozen years ago. I invented a concept for real-time authority building. I call it newsjacking. And this is when you find a trending news story, and you create real-time content around that trending news story because you have an expertise in an aspect of what that trending news story is. And I call it newsjacking, and I push that concept out there. It's not marketing, big M, this huge topic that I'm trying to build authority around in that particular case. It was something really niche and really narrow, and something that I named. I named it newsjacking. I got the URL newsjacking, and I started to talk about the concept of what I described as newsjacking. And then that actually began to take off, the idea of newsjacking. And now there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have talked about newsjacking. It's in the word is in the Oxford English Dictionary. I get alerts every single day of someone who's mentioned it or hashtag been used or whatever. And I invented it. How cool is that? Because I decided I'm not going to try to be an expert in marketing. I want to be an expert in a couple of little niches in marketing. Adam mentioned content marketing, or I call it real-time marketing, newsjacking. And to me, that's still an opportunity for every single person who's listening to or watching this, is pick a niche, pick something that you know, pick a subcategory of the broad topic that you're an expert in, perhaps even invent a word, write a book about it, buy the URL, and push that into the marketplace of ideas, because you never know, it might take off like a couple of the ones that I invented did.
Yeah, David, Joe, you teed me up well for this question for David, and that is for the entrepreneur, the CEO, the executive that's listening to this, and they're like, okay, there are things that I know a lot about, right? So I have expertise, but where do I start? Do I write a book first, or do I start a blog first, or maybe I should do a podcast, or maybe really I should try to improve my speaking skills and go out and start doing some speaking engagements. Where did you start? And then what did you supplement with after you started, and where should people start?
So I started before mainstream social media. So I started by creating my own blog. And I think that I would recommend someone who's in that situation you just described. Perhaps they're working at a company, or perhaps they're the CEO. They want to build authority. And I would suggest two things right off the bat to do. Number one, I think everyone who wants to build authority needs to have their own real estate on the web. What I mean by that is I want you to have either a website or a piece of a website if you work for a company. Ideally, it would still be a website for yourself. Or if you're creating a book, perhaps it's a book website. Or if you're creating an idea, like I just mentioned, newsjacking, there's a newsjacking.com website. So, and that's important because you can't rely exclusively on the social networks to do the creation of your authority for you. And that's an important piece, but you need to have a home base where you push people to, where they can learn more, that you control the visuals, the branding, the ideas. You control where they go next, what the call to action is, what you want them to do, if you want them to buy a book, if you want them to hire you to speak, if you want them to hire your consulting services, if you want them to learn about your company and perhaps buy your company's products or services. You want a place that you can do that. So you need a website or a blog or some other way of having your own real estate. And then the question you asked was specifically to, you're a CEO, you're an executive. I would start with LinkedIn, and most people's LinkedIns that I see are basically not much more than a big resume. And for most people, that's okay, but that's not building authority. So what I strongly recommend that you do right away as a start to building authority is make a commitment that you're going to create a valuable post every week. Better yet, start a LinkedIn newsletter. So LinkedIn has this cool feature called a LinkedIn newsletter. You can say that it's going to be weekly. I do mine weekly. And LinkedIn does some great optimizations for LinkedIn newsletters, and including emailing it to your LinkedIn followers that subscribe to it. So there's some cool things that you can do. And if you're consistent and you're creating good content on LinkedIn, you have an opportunity not only to reach the people who already know you, but when people comment on one of your LinkedIn articles, to reach potentially people who don't yet know you. And that's super cool. And you can build your audience in that way. So that would be my recommendation right off the bat. And specifically for the idea of someone who works at a company is get your LinkedIn to be more than just a resume. Create content religiously every single week and have a presence that you own the real estate of. Ideally, that's a personal website for you, but it could be on a page on your company website, but ideally it's a personal page for you.
Joe, this is a fascinating story that you're going to like. David, we talk about you a lot when we're teaching our members, and we talk about being discoverable. And of course, your name is David Scott. And if I go to Google and type in David Scott, it just so happens there's a lot of people with the name
There's
David.
A lot of people. And there's some famous people, Adam. There's a David Scott who walked on the moon, who I've had dinner with, by the way. There's a David Scott who's a member of Congress. There's a David Scott who's an Ironman triathlon champion. And there's other Davids. I met a David Scott who works at Reuters. There's the other David Scotts out there.
And so we famously tell the story that you literally changed your name. Now, I guess you didn't really change your name.
No, I didn't.
But you started using your middle name as the differentiator so you could be found. Because when I go to Google and I type in David Meerman Scott, there's only one.
Just me. Exactly right, Adam. And I did that.
Tell that story.
I did that 24 years ago. It was right around the time that I was building my first website, personal website for me. Still out there. It's davidmeermanscott.com. And so I'm like, I'm going to make a website for me. I didn't use the language that I'm going to build my authority, but that's what I was planning to do with this website. And that was pretty early to build a website. It was around 1998 or 1999, something like that, building my first personal authority website. And it wasn't even Google, it was Yahoo, I think. Or maybe Alta Vista. I went to whatever search engine I was using at the time. It wasn't Google. I typed in my name and like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? And so I thought it through and I said, all right, I'm going to be unique. I'm going to use my middle name. There is nobody else out in the world that has that name. And so I from that moment forward, I think it's 24 years now, I have continuously used my middle name in my personal work. My books are with my middle name, my website, when I speak, everything is David Meerman Scott. And I can't tell you how important, I bet that was $1 million decision, because I don't think it would have been as possible to build authority with a generic first and last name, David Scott, that both of them are potentially first names and last names. I just it wouldn't have worked. But when I became unique, oh, wow, people remember my name, and you don't have to say David Scott who, it's like, there's only one of me. And so I do highly recommend, not only if you're wanting to build authority, that you have a name that is hopefully as unique as mine, but also with a company that you create or a book title that you create. Adam, I think you and I have had this conversation. I always recommend Google a book title. Go to Amazon and go to the Amazon search engine for the book title that you're planning on using. Can you have the URL for the book title you're choosing? And super important stuff that a lot of people ignore, but is really, really important for authority.
God bless your parents for giving you such a unique middle name, because if you were David John Scott, this would not be good.
And Meerman is it's a Dutch name. My family, long time ago, part of my family came over from the Netherlands, from a place called Dordrecht, and Meerman is the middle name of the firstborn son going through a number of generations. I had a daughter, alas. So the line has been broken, but my grandfather, my uncle, and others all have that middle name. So that's kind of a cool aspect as well.
And, you talk about the steps you took and the $1 million idea to make sure you were David Meerman Scott. But what are some mistakes that you see people doing nowadays? Because and I'm sure you've made them as well along the way, David. You're not perfect, but what are some mistakes that people could make on this sort of authority journey that they're going to begin after listening to this conversation?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is being a cover band. Okay, so I'm a huge music fan. There's a Grateful Dead logo over my shoulder. I need to go back and check my spreadsheet because I went to 3 concerts over the weekend. As we're recording this, I was at the Sphere in Las Vegas. I saw Dead & Company 3 times in a row, which was fabulous. If I'm looking a little bit tired, it was because that was a couple of days ago. The Grateful Dead, now Dead & Company, plays original music. Yes, they play some covers, but primarily the original music. Most people, in my experience, when they're trying to build authority, act like a cover band. In other words, they take other people's ideas, not stealing. I'm not talking about plagiarism or stealing, but they kind of take ideas that already exist, change them a little bit, and throw them out there. I mean, I see that every single day. You guys see that every single day. What's super important in my mind, and what makes for someone to become a true authority, is if they, and I'm using my music metaphor again, they write original music. And I always suggest to authors or people who want to build authority by creating content that they should think about, what are the patterns in the universe that you're seeing that other people aren't seeing? What is something that your unique brain that we've all been given says to you, I see something that the world doesn't? And that spark has come to me a number of times, and several different times. It was such a powerful spark in my mind that I had to create a book around it. And the first time that it was truly successful for me was back in 2005. I was seeing that marketing on the web was utterly different than marketing as it was traditionally done. Actually, it's before 2005, but 2005 was when I first started to write about it. And what I recognized is that marketing on the web is about publishing content. And it's not about doing banner ads and advertising, which is what everybody was doing at the time. So my mind said, oh my gosh, I'm seeing patterns in the universe. And I use that language. I'm seeing patterns in the universe that others aren't seeing. And it's because of my unique experience having worked for financial information companies in the early part of my career and learning about how online content works and online authority and so on. I'm seeing something no one else is seeing. And so that caused me to furiously begin writing the book that eventually became The New Rules of Marketing and PR. And as we speak, has sold 500,000 copies in 29 languages. And the 9th edition comes out in August of 2024. And that was that pattern in the universe. That's the biggest mistake I see is people just kind of write something that's already been done, change a little bit. I'm not saying they're copying others. They're not, but it's basically just, for example, the world does not need another book on how to use AI in marketing. There's a lot of those out there, but maybe there's a twist on AI and marketing, a new way of thinking about AI and marketing. And so that becomes that unique pattern in the universe.
So David, let's talk for a minute about books and specifically the role that they have played in your authority journey. Certainly for you, the author of 12 books, you are that serial author. The topics of the book do vary. There's a marketing element that's the central theme behind all of them, but you've done some really neat things with creating your own vocabulary. You mentioned newsjacking, obviously Fanocracy, and I want you to talk about that book. You've brilliantly exploited authority by association with your book, Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. So a really neat way for you to tie your personal passion into your profession. But what role do books play in your authority? And what was the impetus to create the first book? And like, how did you get it done? Because creating a book's really hard. And most people not only can't imagine writing a book, but they have no idea even how to go about doing it.
Right. Well, first thing they should do is contact you. But the idea of writing a book, I don't think of as I have to write 300 pages or whatever. I have to write 60,000 words. That's daunting. Instead, the way I like to think of it, is that I like to think of it as I'm going to write 100 blog posts. That's manageable. I could do one a day even. I don't work at that pace. I typically would do maybe one every couple of days, but a blog post, 100 blog posts can be enough content for a book. So think of it in chunks. And I think in my mind, the books for me have been transformational because that's allowed me to move well beyond the people who find me through search or the people that I'm exposed to in my everyday life, because my books are found in bookstores. My books are talked about, and passed on from person to person. a particularly important thing in my career, very, very important thing in my career, has been that my books are in 30 languages. And I've now delivered paid presentations in more than 30 countries because, I think I have 6 books out in Italy, and I've presented in Italy, I think, a dozen times. That's huge for what I do. The idea that just one country, and I've just signed a deal to go back to Italy again in Rome and the end of the year. The idea that putting out a book and then have it come out in other languages allows me to get my ideas to people who would never have found them otherwise. So really, really, really important for me, for my thought leadership and my authority around this idea of publishing books. And I think that some people, I don't know whether they're doing it for the right reasons. Sure, it's nice to say I'm a published author and give a copy to to somebody that you want them to appreciate that. And that's all great. But what I love about it is that you have the opportunity to reach people that you've never met. And Adam, I think you and I have talked about this because I know that Advantaged Forbes Books definitely works in this area. But having your book available in airport bookstores, phenomenal, and I remember many times Pumbin would reach out and say, I was in LAX and I was walking through, I went to the bookstore, I found your book, I read it coast to coast, and I want you to come and speak at my event. Wow, that's super cool. If I hadn't had a book, if I hadn't had the book in the airport bookstore, that never would have happened. So it's getting my ideas out there in different ways.
Yeah, and you also have made the deliberate decision that which requires a lot of work, that you're not going to just write one book and be done, but you are going to commit to publishing new content regularly to stay top of mind. And so, over that 24-year career where you've really been a thought leader post-corporate, that's a book every other year. Kind of,
yeah. And at one point it was like one every year, which was way too much. So I've pulled back a little bit, but it has been important because I've put different ideas out there. You mentioned Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. Another kind of fun outlier book I wrote is called Marketing the Moon, and it's about the marketing aspects of the Apollo Lunar program. And as we're recording this, this weekend, there's a new film that's coming out. It may even actually be coming out today as we're filming this, called Fly Me to the Moon. And it's a comedy about the Apollo lunar landings. And I've seen a whole bunch of news stories about it that have mentioned my book, Marketing the Moon. And I don't know this for an absolute fact, but some of the articles have implied that the producers studied the book to learn about how marketing was done during the Apollo lunar program in order to be accurate for how they're going to create this movie. Now, how cool is that? And you can't get that kind of thing unless you're cranking out new ideas and new concepts. And just an aside on this, on the super interesting aspect of authority, is yes, I wrote a book called Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. That has allowed me to meet all of the living members of the Grateful Dead and have conversations with them. Marketing the Moon came out a couple of years ago from MIT Press. And when that book came out, literally a couple of days after it came out, I got an email from the head of PR at NASA. And he says, hey, we want you to come down to Washington, D.C. and talk to us about how we can do a better job marketing the Artemis program, which is the new moon missions that NASA is working on. Well, that sounds pretty cool. So I went down there. It was a full-day meeting. And about halfway through the meeting, they said, oh, well, Jim Bridenstine would like to meet you. And I ended up spending 2 hours with him. He was the administrator of NASA, the top guy in NASA. 2 hours in his office with him, chatting about marketing ideas. That would never have happened without the authority of a book. And to me, what's super great about this stuff, it's not the ability, I mean, yes, it's important to feed my family, the money that comes in from being able to do speaking gigs and whatnot, but it's these opportunities that I never would have gotten in my corporate career. The opportunity to spend time with the members of my favorite band, the opportunity to spend time with one of the most, I think, the most interesting marketing case studies in the entire world and in all time. It's how NASA convinced the American public to fund 12 guys to walk around on the moon. That's crazy to me, which allows me to meet astronauts that have walked on the moon, which allowed me to go in the zero-G plane and float around with Charlie Duke from Apollo 16, which allowed me to spend a full day at NASA and part of that with the head of NASA. That's crazy stuff that you can only get with authority from a book.
Well, speaking of opportunities, that's definitely a missed opportunity. You should call your lawyers, because I know you have newsjacking, but it sounds like you got bookjacked by Apple. That you should really call them and know, hey, wait, by the way, if you wrote a little bit of this stuff because of my book, I would like a little remuneration. Has that been?
It'll be really interesting. I'm going to read the credits carefully. It'll be really interesting to see if they mention the book. That book, by the way, one more thing here, which I just thought of. Nonfiction books, people think, movie rights, you put in the contract. I don't know how you do your contracts, Adam, but, in the contract, movie rights, people, I didn't put it in there. I sold the movie rights to Marketing the Moon, and it ended up being a 3-part PBS American Experience miniseries that came out a couple of years ago. A marketing book turned into a movie. Crazy stuff. And so these opportunities can only come around if you persevere to see patterns in the universe that others aren't seeing, make the effort to get that book out there, do something that you're passionate about, and incredible doors open. Incredible doors. Adam, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met you, Joe. So amazing stuff.
And let me tie this golden thread together for our viewers, because I think there's some really important lessons here. David, you said the riches are in the niches. And you have demonstrated that. Obviously, a marketing book about lessons learned from the Grateful Dead, very, very unique. Nobody else is doing that. Marketing lessons from Marketing the Moon, very unique. Nobody else is doing that. You are truly in a category of one. But the other thing is, for anybody that's thinking, gee, this authority building stuff isn't going to be that much fun, you have very intentionally tied your business, which puts significant income and wealth into your family. You have made this fun. How many Grateful Dead concerts have you been to?
111.
And I believe a little bird has told me that maybe you have the largest private collection of artifacts from the Lunar Moon program.
I have one of the most important collections of artifacts from the Apollo Lunar Program in a museum that's down the hall in my home. I have the rotational control handle that controlled Apollo 12. I have a checklist that was used on the surface of the moon with Apollo 17. I own an Apollo guidance computer keyboard. I mean, I've got a really serious Smithsonian level a collection of artifacts from the Apollo program. That's where the passion started. And then the pattern in the universe, we've talked about this now a number of times, and here we go again, but the pattern in the universe was, how the hell do we get to the moon? Oh, well, it required marketing. Oh, well, no one's ever written about that. I should write about that. And so as you say, Adam, correctly, mixing my passion with something that is also going to generate income is super. Oh, what a great way to make a living. What a great way to live a life.
So David, all of this authority has also done two really big things, one of which is open the door for very lucrative speaking opportunities, but also a number of board positions. And so you sit on a lot of boards, you have stock and equity in a lot of companies. And I think it's probably fair to say that the authority that you've built has opened up many of these doors.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Absolutely, 100%. So you mentioned HubSpot earlier. It's interesting story behind that. So HubSpot now, today, has 220, I think, thousand customers, $2.5 billion in revenue, trading on the New York Stock Exchange. I think last time I checked, 8,000 employees. I've been on their board of advisors for 17 years. And when I first met HubSpot, they read the first edition when I say they, everyone in the company read the first edition of the New Rules of Marketing and PR. And I got an email from the chief marketing officer of HubSpot saying, we want you to come in and meet our co-founders and have a chat about marketing. We've read your book. We love it. And they were 10 miles away from where I'm standing right now. And so, cool, that sounds great. Let's do it. So I walked in, and I love this part of the story. I had my notebook computer with me. I opened up my notebook computer, and there's a Grateful Dead sticker on it. And Brian Halligan, the CEO and co-founder of HubSpot, says, hang on, I want to talk about marketing, but let's talk about your Grateful Dead sticker first. And I said, oh my God, I'm a huge fan. At that point, I think I had seen them, 70 times, whatever. And Brian said, I'm a huge fan. I've seen them 100 times. So we geeked out about the Grateful Dead for 10 minutes. And the other guys from HubSpot are like, oh God, here he goes again about Brian. So we shared the passion, but then we talked about marketing. And it turns out we had the exact same kind of mind meld, me and the people at HubSpot, about how marketing was changing. And this was back in 2007, long time ago. And so within I think 2 weeks, I was on their advisory board, and they had just done their Series A round of funding. Now they're public. And so, yeah, it's been lucrative. I've gotten a stock grant every year for 17 years. It's been fabulous. And that never, ever, ever, ever would have happened if Mike Volpe hadn't read my book and then passed it around to everybody in the company. That never would have happened. So yeah, those doors open because of a book.
And of course, you're one of the top speakers every year for Tony Robbins and his business mastery program. That's authority by association. Of course, his authority is so big, and you being his handpicked guy for his business mastery program, incredible authority by association there.
And Adam also, I'm not sure if you know this part of the story, also because Tony Robbins read the New Rules of Marketing and PR about a decade ago. He said, I want this guy to come and do a talk, and if I like him, maybe I'll have him come back. That was 10 years ago. And I must have done a good job, because I've now been coming back for 10 years. I think I've done 30 or 35 talks for Tony Robbins. It's been great.
So David, let's talk about one thing real quick. That yes, you've got to have great content. You also have to be able to deliver that great content in a compelling way, especially if you're going to get invited to speak so many places. So talk about the investment that you've had to make in yourself. So yes, you have authority, but to remain at the top, you've got to keep bettering your best. And so maybe just help our listeners and viewers understand, what are you doing as an authority to keep elevating yourself year over year so you stay at the peak?
Two things come to mind, Adam. First thing is I'm constantly trying to keep on top of what's going on in marketing. Marketing is my thing. And it's hard. There's always something new going on in marketing. And I try to find thought leaders and authorities in different aspects of marketing. So for example, artificial intelligence in marketing, super interesting to me. So I zeroed in on the Marketing Artificial Intelligence Institute. I joined their, I became an advisor, invested in that organization, and they're doing great work helping me to understand how artificial intelligence can be applied to marketing. So that's the first thing, keeping up to date with what's going on in the field that I am already an authority in, but I could absolutely lose my authority if the market moves against me and I haven't kept up with something like, for example, artificial intelligence. The other aspect that's been very important for me is When I first started this journey 20 something years ago, I was an okay speaker. I wasn't a good speaker. So I've had to work really hard at becoming a good, and now I get pretty good reviews. I'm not going to say I'm a great speaker, but now I love speaking. I love learning about speaking. I love honing my skills. I've worked with a speaker coach now on a regular basis for, I think it's been 15 years, constantly honing that craft, that skill, so that when I hit a stage, I take it super seriously. And here's what I think of. I think of a stage where in the audience, if it's a Tony Robbins event, there might be 2,000 people in the audience. I have a 2-hour speaking slot. That's 4,000 hours of attention I'm commanding by being on the stage. I can't screw it up. So I take very, very seriously the way that I deliver my presentation, my skills, to make sure that I'm doing it as well as I possibly can. And that means I had to learn in the beginning because I was not a great speaker in the beginning, and had to work really hard at it. And I'm still constantly honing that skill and improving wherever I can that skill. So those two things were really important for me.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation, David Meerman Scott. We could talk to you for hours, but you have a Grateful Dead concert to get to, and I'm sure Adam too. But we appreciate them. If folks want to find out more about you, we've kind of alluded how to find you, but where's the best place to start to find out more about David Meerman Scott?
My full name is my website, or you can Google me. There's all sorts of stuff that's pointing just to me, David Meerman, Meerman Scott. And on most of the social networks, I am DM Scott, DMSCOTT.
Thank you, David.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Adam, you weren't kidding. This guy knows what he's talking about, huh?
Powerful stuff here. Success leaves clues, Joe.
Awesome. And next time, we're going to get into PR with Terry Stanton from Advantage Media. Adam, tell me about PR. Why is it important when it comes to building authority?
Man, people don't believe what you say about yourself, but they sure do believe what other people say about you. And that, for that reason alone, we're going to want to pay close attention to what Terry says on our next episode.
Awesome. Adam, I'll see you next time.
Okay. Thank you, guys.